Here's how most scenarios in Fire Emblem play out. Starting the game, you guide your units through a series of chapters, learn a little bit more about their character, maybe even grow an attachment. You give them EXP and watch them level up, and the better they perform, the prouder you are of the characters you've come to love. You survive through the thick and thin, always having faith in your companions, and most of the time, they're able to get out of dangerous altercations unscathed. But suddenly, disaster strikes. You see that 2% crit on the battle forecast, and this time around, your beloved friend has been met with an untimely death. Now this is what is referred to as bullshit. You played well and didn't deserve to lose that character. You're left with a choice. Do you reset and start the chapter over, sacrificing your time and patience? Or do you press on without your fallen comrade? It's a tough decision to make, especially if you were met with great luck in other facets of the chapter. This choice is a product of permadeath, a concept present in every entry since the year 1990. Regarded as one of Fire Emblem's flagship mechanics, it has given the series a hardcore label. Simple mistakes can either force you to restart your progress, or punish you for the rest of the campaign. You, the Tactician, are responsible for the lives of your soldiers, and if one falls due to your poor decision making, or unfortunately, bad RNG, you can kiss that unit goodbye. This may be a hard pill to swallow for anyone trying to dip their toes into the series, and with such a brutal mechanic present, many people shy away from even picking up one of the games. To alleviate this problem, the most recent entries in the franchise have looked towards a new quality of life solution. But with its addition, have we lost an aspect of Fire Emblem that made these games engaging? And does it completely trivialize the beautiful balance of risk versus reward? This video is a criticism of the Turnwheel, a tool that allows players to redo their actions during a chapter with a limited amount of uses. But before we get into that, let's make an argument in its favor as a mechanic. It's pretty clear by the title that I don't like its addition to Fire Emblem games, but that doesn't mean that it's without its merit. Many players love this system for sparing them from some of the most frustrating moments that can come while playing one of these games, so let's see why it can be a good thing. Remember that bullshit I was referring to earlier? Yeah, it happens to everyone eventually. RNG exists in the system, and when the luck comes to bite you back, all you can do is sit there, grit your teeth, and think, that's no fair. It sounds like we found the root of the problem, so why don't we just get rid of RNG then? Or at least try to limit it? Yeah, I just made a straw man argument. I don't think there are many people who want RNG removed from Fire Emblem, but as frustrating as RNG can be sometimes, it's extremely important to keep a certain element intact, and that is replayability. Imagine there being no RNG in a game like Fire Emblem. Sure, the tactics would be amazing. You could optimize maps with strategies that are essentially guaranteed to work if you're a good enough player, and, oh wait, now we're left with tactics drills in Fire Emblem Heroes. Fun. So in essence, if we need RNG in the mainline series to ensure every experience is unique, the Turnwheel is a reasonable solution to counteract the bullshit you're destined to encounter. You're given a set amount of uses during a chapter, and just in case you're hit with that 2% crit, you don't have to sacrifice an hour of your night because of forces that were out of your control. This concept of making a checkpoint mid-map isn't anything new to the series, and let's be real, that's essentially what a Turnwheel does. It autosaves at every move you make, and you get to reload your save when you touch that button. Previous titles have allowed the player to save progress mid-map, so there aren't any rules stating that Fire Emblem games can't have this. So, allow me to introduce to you the sleek and sexy Turnwheel, introduced in 2017's Echoes: Shadows of Valentia. This time around, the idea was to give the player convenience and a way to curb bad luck while making it a limited resource. You only start out with a few uses during the earlier sections of the game, and the amount of uses increases in tandem with the difficulty of the later acts. It works wonderfully in Echoes because battles can be drawn out by infinitely spawning enemies, and the game has these dungeon crawling sections where the player may encounter several skirmishes without being able to save their progress. This feature was more of a quality of life consideration rather than a factor that influenced the game design of Echoes. Is it beatable without a Turnwheel? Absolutely. Would it be annoying without it? Yeah, definitely. In order to be more welcoming to non-veterans of the series, Turnwheel added convenience at the touch of a button for players who otherwise may be caught off guard by the game's archaic design. And in 2019, Three Houses gave us Divine Pulse, which is much appreciated. Mainly because of the roster size and how much investment and resources each unit takes. If you lose a character, it really doesn't make sense to push on without them. You can't recruit any new units after the halfway point, and the characters you might try to replace them with won't be nearly as good as the former. And of course, there is Maddening, a difficulty that seems like it was designed with Divine Pulses in mind. Not even factoring in the boosted stats of the enemies and the limited EXP you earn for kills, Maddening loves to use cheesy skill combos, enemy gambits, and same turn reinforcements that basically require the player to use Divine Pulse. That, or know the entire map like the back of their hand. Sure, it's optional, but when you consider how unfair maps can be along with the character investment conundrum, trying to play the game without this mechanic is almost unbearable. And don't forget about Cindered Shadows. Despite the criticisms it has received, it was actually quite a pleasant experience with Divine Pulses. The difficulty was well balanced to provide a challenge for the player, mainly thanks to how much control the developers had over your army, and the addition of a Turnwheel was welcomed because of the limited quantity of characters that were available. The amount of pulse uses didn't feel abusable, and some of the maps provided great moments of think-on-your-feet problem solving that didn't feel overly punishing thanks to its convenience. Overall, the Turnwheel can be considered a welcomed change to the series. In a game where defeat or character death means wasting 30 minutes to an hour of your time, you can definitely see why some people love mechanics like this. The less you encounter punishing moments from bullshit, the more pleasant it can be. There's even some entries in the series that I think would be improved with the addition of a Turnwheel, just due to how many unfair mechanics that are present. But of course, now I have to turn into the bad guy. While I agree that Turnwheel is nice as a feature, I feel that Fire Emblem as a series would be better if it moved away from it. So in order to understand why I like suffering, I feel we need to define what I think is the single most important aspect of these games. Care to take a guess? Well, I mean, that's not a bad guess, but it's also not correct. Yeah, try again. Wrong! Tension, folks. Tension is the single most important factor to enjoying one of these games. For me, at least. What is tension exactly? In Fire Emblem, I like to think of it as the unknown. Will my character land this hit? Will they get crit by the enemy berserker? Are there reinforcements coming? When your unit's lives are on the line, these little scenarios you're presented with become much more enthralling, and if you're successful in a sticky situation, the victory feels all the better. One could say that if no struggle is present, accomplishments feel, well, less accomplishing. Stressful scenarios can be a turnoff for tons of players, but without a sense of tension, it really feels like any progression you make in the game is weightless. If you've played an FE game on an emulator with save states, I'm sure you've felt what I'm talking about. You aren't really forced to think. You can just play on autopilot, and if you're met with an unfavorable situation, you just hit that F1 key until you're happy. Did you beat the game? Sure, I won't discredit you at all. But the notion of being able to save at any point during a level, and having the ability to reload right when a mistake is made, circumvents the design intent that developers had when they were creating these games. So now, when they add it as a featured mechanic in the title, they either have to design the game to be balanced around it, or it just sours the experience for the other half of the player base that doesn't want it. The addition of a Turnwheel, when left unchecked, essentially creates an auto-recording save state that completely kills tension. Three Houses Maddening is the best argument to make for a Turnwheel. The difficulty is satisfying to play, and catches you off guard constantly. You'll find yourself burning through pulses like crazy. But even with this mechanic being implemented in a scenario where it's completely warranted, I still feel like the tension in the chapter has a negative correlation with how many Turnwheel uses you have remaining. Shit doesn't get real until you see that you only have 1 to 3 uses left, and that's when your decisions start to feel like they really matter. Sure, you're encouraged to take it seriously from the get-go to conserve as many divine pulses as possible, but you always have that safety in the back of your mind. And knowing that if things turn south, you have more chances ready at the touch of a button, you're more than likely to get complacent because the game has failed to apply tension. And this is just for Maddening, folks, a difficulty that wasn't even present during the launch of the game. And, of course, when you try to tie it into the story of the game, it kind of makes things sloppy. But I don't think I need to get into that. Don't get me started on games that have unlimited battle saves implemented. Does Genealogy of the Holy War ever bring that tension and push you to the edge to survive and conquer? Not if you're playing with battle saves. You're given a safety net at every little step, and can keep mindlessly bashing your units against any obstacle until you're given a favorable outcome. This is especially bad when RNG comes into play. Now, if you're skilled enough to try to do a high-ranked run, the game keeps track of who died, so you can't abuse the save feature. But then what are you left with? A brutal game that takes multiple hours to get to a checkpoint, so you better know what the hell you're doing? Or you're left with a game that lets you reload whenever a character dies, and you just get to thoughtlessly brute force your way through the maps. With these saves present, your risks are essentially cut down to 0. Want to take a guess on how I beat Echoes on hard mode? Well, I abused my 11 Turnwheel uses until my Alm landed 2 crits on Duma. Did I feel accomplished for beating the game? No, not really. I used a mechanic that would ensure my luck would be favorable, and that allowed me to act like a dumbass to see if I could get super lucky. And if I didn't get lucky, I just get to reload the chapter with my Turnwheel uses refilled. Don't get me wrong, in these two examples, the saving features are extremely welcomed, but that's not because the Turnwheel is a good mechanic. It's because the gameplay designs of these titles are flawed to begin with. I don't believe there's such a thing as a flawless Fire Emblem game, but if we're going to be keeping permadeath in mind, FE4 and Echoes are extremely frustrating without these saving features. How are you supposed to strategize against a horde of 12 copy-pasted units running headfirst at you? What about witches that have the ability to warp behind your front line and wreak havoc? Well, sure, you don't have to play the game with the Turnwheel, but there is a lot of room for error in this game. So if I'm playing casually without setting my own rule set to prevent the Turnwheel from being used, you bet your ass I don't want to reset if I lose a character. Without it, Echoes would feel extremely tedious and unfun to play. The enemy patterns that are thrown at you are sometimes unmanageable. Shoutouts to Invoke. And I strongly believe that when they were developing Echoes, the designers realized that without a mid-map saving system, this would be one of the more infuriating experiences in the franchise. And yeah, with FE4, Sleep Staves, and Pavis, I don't think I need to explain further. And now, in current year, it seems that we have a design philosophy issue at Intelligent Systems. Bottom line, Three Houses feels like it was designed with Divine Pulse in mind. Otherwise, the roster size and gigantic investment costs are unjustifiable. The map design, ambush spawns, and enemy layouts make it apparent to me that Divine Pulse was a bullet point when they had to create concepts during the R&D phase. So what am I trying to get at? Basically, for these games, saving mechanics are necessary due to how they're designed. Is that a bad thing? Well, to me it is, because when you're able to save during any point of a chapter, even if it has limited uses, it literally throws off the balance of risk versus reward. Having this balance dictates how you strategize, and you'll see that players who minimize risk while keeping maximum yields in mind end up performing very well, and that delivers a satisfying tactical experience. But as it is now with the Turnwheel, you get 10 chances to do stupid things and try your luck at getting that high risk reward without actually putting your neck on the line. It completely removes the tension from the game, and while convenient for patching up unfortunate RNG, I don't feel like it's a price worth paying for the satisfaction you get for playing the game well.
Hey Speedy, guess what?
What?
It's optional.
I can't argue with that. At the end of the day, I'm not forced to use it. But when it's present and the game feels like it's designed around its use, it makes it harder and harder to avoid it. So what was the point of this video? Well, it was to look towards the future. I'm sure it's not really a hot take, but for the next game in the series, I really hope the developers make some changes. So here is my proposed solution. They can keep Turnwheel in the game, but bottom line, they need to design and balance the game without a Turnwheel. This is just a hunch, but I feel the devs for Three Houses were able to make some of the decisions that they did because they had the crutch of Divine Pulses to lean on. So I say, take that crutch away and put your main focus on the highest difficulty setting. Is it completable and tolerable without a Turnwheel? Thank you. Now you can add the Turnwheel. Wait, wasn't my whole argument to remove it from Fire Emblem? Well, with a solution like this, it is removed. As of now, in modern Fire Emblem, we have casual and classic mode and a plethora of difficulties to choose from. They can keep their existing system with Phoenix, casual, and classic functioning as they did in the past, but add a new mode above classic called hardcore or something equally as douchey. You can keep the Turnwheel usable in these three modes, but for hardcore, just remove it. Now we have an actual quality of life feature available, and the highest difficulty is still completable without adding a mechanic that kills tension and ruins risk versus reward. If they make a game that balances the length between chapters and difficulty of it where resetting doesn't feel like torture, and they also give players a feasible option to replace fallen units, then a Turnwheel wouldn't be required. We can just make it an option for players who would prefer to have it. We'll see what Intelligent Systems chooses to do with their next title, but if they end up adding Turnwheel to a remake of any of the GBA games or Path of Radiance, I really hope they add a mode where you can just toggle it off. Otherwise, my tiny reptilian brain will have to struggle to resist the temptation to turn back time. But you know what? Turnwheel for Radiant Dawn doesn't sound too bad. Just stick it in Laren's medallion, retcon the lore, and call it a day.